Good morning or good evening, depending on what side of the world you're in. Mm, Douglas, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. I'm fighting off allergies this morning. I'm coughing and eyes watering, but not like it's a heart attack or something. So I'm just happy to be here. How are you,
Hey,
buddy?
that is a plus. I'm doing good. I'm doing real good. Sinus problems haven't hit me yet, but that's usually later on in the months. I'm good for that to happen at least once or twice a year. Before we get started, I'll go ahead and give a nice little disclaimer. All the information discussed here in this interview is intended for historical, entertainment, and educational purposes only. None of this information is intended for anything illegal. All opinions are those of the respected individuals. In other words, guys, don't be stupid. We're here with Douglas Bruce, who should not need any introduction. Probably started gamefowl when you were what, 5, 6 years old with your dad.
I, my dad had them long before I was around. Dad had game fowl, late 50s, early 60s. I came along in 66. And some of my earliest memories were walking through the teepees and seeing the roosters on the tie cord. Some of my baby memories. And based on the place where we lived at the time, my mom told me that I was 3. So I can remember back until I was 3 and there being game fowl then. So yeah, I've been around it a long time.
So tonight, what we're going to talk about specifically is game fowl conditioning and that sort of stuff. I've seen a lot of questions, people asking about tie cords, free ranging, all that kind of stuff. So I thought to myself, I was like, okay, for the first show, who better to bring on than the guy that's been around it all of his life and written a book or two about it, done a video or two, got some movies, DVDs out there. So I figured you would be someone that would definitely know a lot about conditioning. First thing though, I got to ask this question, and it may catch you off guard. It may not. Everybody wants to know when you caught us all off guard when you announced that you were in the Top Spur live streams. What are you doing now? What's next for
Well,
Douglas?
I had planned to go until the end of the year, maybe the first of the year. And then I was going to step back from it some and let Big Mike take the show and put him with someone else to help him with the show. And me come on, maybe do a small package, or do something every little bit. But just circumstances, the way it worked out, I decided to step out now. And so I've been learning a lot of new software, video editing software, and I've been working on this new book, A History of the Game File Volume 2, the second volume in it. And when I wrote the first one, I called it Volume 1 in faith that I would be able to write another one. So I didn't know at the time, if Lord willing, if I'd get to write it or not. But now I'm really zoned in on it. So I'm really spending most of my time uh, researching, studying a lot of these old bloodlines, refreshing my memory about a lot of them, trying to get a book out by Christmas.
That'll be real good. So people out there, I didn't say this before, but everybody or a lot of people know Jeff Maddox, who he is. He is the guy that created the recipe. And Douglas went and said, hey, I want to make something that'll do this. And Jeff said, okay, I think we can do that with this and this. So Jeff and I are going to do this show. And one of the questions that he wanted me to make sure that I ask, which he can't be with us today because he's on the road a couple times a year. He travels around and visits folks and does some farm visits and stuff. But he wanted me to ask, how do you feel that we can continue to provide quality information for the game fowl folks?
I was super pleased. I didn't know that you were planning to do a show or thinking about doing a show until after of course, you being involved with Rapido like you are now, and me stepping back from everything. You were the second person I told, other than my immediate family. Actually, you were the first person I told, other than my immediate family, that I was going to step back from the show. And when you told me, I was really pleased to hear that you and Jeff we're going to continue on with something, with doing a show about gamefowl nutrition, gamefowl healthcare. That's and all the subjects you guys are going to cover. So I was really pleased to hear it when you guys decided to do the show and continue on. I think that there's a constant need for education. One, gamefowl people change slowly. They don't want to give up their traditions. They don't want to give up what Papa taught them. Even if modern science has proved it to be totally non-reliable, what they've been doing in the past, even if the results have not proven to be reliable, it's just hard for people to let go of something they were taught from the time they were a kid or a young person. No one wants to admit that they were doing it the wrong way or the least of, or that there's a better, more efficient way of doing things out there. And the other thing is, you can teach on the same subject multiple times, and then people that seem like they watch you all the time still will come back and ask you the same question over. It's like sometimes it's what I'm trying to say is an ongoing thing. Teaching is an ongoing thing. And I don't think if you're in this business, you ever quit learning or you ever quit teaching. If you have stopped learning, that's the time to get out.
Yeah, my granddaddy told me many years ago, he said that it doesn't matter what you do, you should always be a student of your craft. And so what your craft is, you should always be a student of it.
Yeah.
Because the day you think you you know everything, somebody's going to prove you wrong.
Yeah. My mentor, Mike Ratliff, we were over here in 2015 and he was 90 years old at that time. And he told me then, he said, there's not a day goes by I don't learn something new about a game fowl, about a game rooster, a game hen. He said, the minute you quit learning, he said, you might as well just hang it up because they are so complex. People think that, oh, it's just a dumb chicken. No, they're really, they're incredibly smart and they are incredibly complex. And so there's a lot to it.
I had a guy send me a message today from Hawaii and he said, can you give a chicken, can they eat too much grit? And I said, not naturally. And he was like, how do they know? And I said, and I told the guy flat out, I said, you know something, I don't know. But what I do know is if the chicken will only eat what they need. Just like if the feed you're feeding them does not have enough methionine in it, then they're going to chase down a chicken and they're going to pluck a feather and they're going to eat that feather so they can get the methionine. Now, if those suckers are smart enough to know that,
well, it's
to not eat too many rocks.
And same way with grass, you let a chicken out, you keep the chicken up in the pen for 2 weeks and then you let him out. The first thing he does is go and eat grass. But if he's out running out, you won't see him eating grass rarely. And so they know what they need. The body does that. I heard a story one time, a guy was talking about, he was stuck in a lifeboat for 2 or 3 weeks, been in a ship and stuff in a lifeboat. And he started craving, he was catching fish is how he was staying alive, but he started craving the eyes of the fish. That's the part that he was craving. And it turned out there was something in that. The doctor told him much later that there was something in that he needed. And so your body is smart enough. It'll crave what it is that it needs. Apparently from looking at me, I must need cheesecake because that's what I usually crave. But with gamefowl, they know what, like you said, they know where to source what they need. Mm-hmm. And I think it would be impossible for them to just on their own eat too much grit.
Yeah, I told him, I said, I would never think that to be the case. I feed it free choice, and some days they'll go through more than others, but I've never had a bird pass away and pick him up and discover his crops full of grit. No. Yeah. So tonight I want to talk about gamefowl conditioning. Mm-hmm. So tell me what gamefowl conditioning is exactly. And
for me, I'm one of those people that I just don't want to know how to do something. I want to know why I'm doing it. I need to know the purpose of it. A lot of people are okay with just saying, this is what my daddy taught me to do, or this is what my uncle taught me to do. So we always did it. I'm not satisfied with that. That's how I came to the conclusions that I did on pointing. But for me, my definition of conditioning is nothing more than exercise and nutrition. The purpose of pointing for me in my definition is to return the bird to the physical and mental condition that he would be in if he were running out free. A gamecock will stay in excellent condition if he's running out free in the woods, roosting in the trees, and all of that. But when we domesticate him and put him in a pen, or put him on a tie cord, we limit him. We limit his exercise. We limit him mentally as well. So that's getting him back to that state is the reason that I condition, getting him back as close as I can. That's why cockers in the old times and the early 1900s, they would walk cocks. They would take a cock and put him with a few hens and put him at this guy's house, and then down the road they do it again, and then on down the road they do it again. And when they got ready to fight the roosters for a main or a tournament, they would go pick up those roosters, and the roosters would be in excellent condition, and they would fight them right off a walk. That's how they fought roosters back then. Conditioning didn't come around for a long time. A lot of people in the late 1800s, early 1900s never even imagined conditioning a rooster like we do today here in the Philippines.
So, what would you say is the most important part about free ranging? You said you were talking about free ranging. What's the most important part about that? And then what the birds get from it?
A couple of things. One, the mental attitude is a big deal mentally. Gamefowl are territorial, and they dominate their area. They also need to dominate their mate. They need to be in control of their set of hens. A lot of times you'll see, if you're running chickens out, a lot of times you'll see a stag take a pullet or two and go somewhere else to get away from get away from the competition. And you do that in the wild as well. You see it with like wild turkeys and things like that. That part of it is a big part of it, the mental part of it. And then the instinctual development, but also just the exercise itself. Running in the wild, chickens tend not to overeat. They'll stay fit. They stay healthy because they're flying up into trees. They're constantly alert as to predators, much more than they are when they're standing in a pen. And I think that mental edge that they have is a big bonus.
Yeah. When my son, when he was a teenager and lived with us, he had a bunch of gamefowl. And he's actually the one that got me interested in gamefowl. And it'd be nothing for me to come home from work and there'd be 50, 80 birds just running around the yard.
Mm-hmm.
And they were hunting and pecking and scratching in the grass and leaves, and they would eat we didn't have any ticks. We didn't have any mosquitoes. They took care of all that. And then the trees, I kept the trees trimmed to where I could cut grass without having to duck. At least 6'5", 6'6" was the lowest limb.
Yeah.
And every single one, you go out there at night and they would be all over the backyard. Just hilarious. Yeah. So I could see the benefits of them getting the plenty of exercise. And like we talked before, they know what they need to eat. Their guts know, and if they need one type of protein, they'll find bugs or they'll eat grass or whatever they need.
Carey, I've seen it over here, especially a lot of times with the backyard breeders who have 2 or 3, maybe 5 roosters. They'll have them on very short tie cords, sometimes 3 foot long tie cords, very short, because they're very limited on space. Right. And yet they want to participate in the sport. For me personally, if I can't do it right, I'm not going to do it. But these guys, I understand that's fine, but they'll keep them on a 3 foot tie cord. And I've seen it happen many times where you take that rooster that's been on a 3 foot tie cord for a while and you put him in a fly pen with a 5 foot roost, and they can't get up on a 5 foot roost. It'll take them all day trying to get up. At night, they'll be missing it, trying to get up on the roost pole. And sometimes you have to go in and set them up on the roost pole because it takes them
muscles.
Takes them multiple days sometimes to get to it because they've been limited. They've been limited as to what they can do. And that roosting out in the trees and all of that, while it's not exactly safe, but the old guys believe that when they're running on a walk like that, if they're roosting up in the top of a barn or whatever, they stayed in much better shape, ready to fight mentally and physically. So
Well, when they're out, when they're in a tree, they got to keep their head on the swivel. They got to constantly be alert because,
yeah,
like where I live I'm in the country because where my house is, I'm in the middle of the woods. But 3 miles up the road, I've got half a dozen banks, Walmart, several different retail centers, and all kinds of stuff like that. So
yeah.
for me, like they can't do that. I have last year from August to November, I counted 32 raccoons that subsequently had issues with lead poisoning in my backyard because of that. They were trying to get my birds, and my birds are in pens. So it definitely keeps them alert and all that kind of stuff. So that's really good. When you transition, like from, let's say you go from free range to fly pens and tie cords and stuff like that. So obviously you can, when they hatch out, you can let them free range after they're ready to, you don't have to keep them warm unless you've got a hen that's doing a really good job. After that, you put them into fly pens or you free range them for a while. When do you decide, okay, I need to put these birds up? I need to put them in a fly pen or whatever. When do you decide?
I range my stags as long as I possibly can. The pullets, it's not such an issue, but I try to range the stags as long as I possibly can. And I take a lot of heat on it over social media, people that don't understand what we do or how it works or that it works. But I try to range stags at least 9, 10 months old, 11 months old. And I've been real successful with it. Ratliff taught it to me. Mike Ratliff taught it to me. And he learned it when he was a kid from an 80-year-old man that he worked for and helped with his gamefowl. So it's been around at least a couple of 100 years. So that ranging process, letting them stay out on the range as long as possible gives them the best potential for the most development, mentally, instinctually, physically, all of that. And it's done by suppressing that desire to come in and fight. And you do that by keeping a cock with them, an old cock. I keep his spurs sawed completely down, and he's the boss. And it's nothing more than the big dog, little dog syndrome. I used to have a poodle, and I bought a Rottweiler pup, and the poodle was older, and the poodle would beat up the pup whenever she wanted. And then when the Rottweiler is 160 pounds and the poodle's still 7 pounds, the poodle's still telling the Rottweiler what to do. She could load him right up in his doghouse, no problem. And with stags, it's the same way until they come to a certain point. But I try to range them as long as I can. I like to get 9.5, 10 months out of them if I can. Everybody else I know is having to put up stags at 4 and 5 months.
Yeah.
And it's as I can, and of course, a lot of, you get the typical, they can't explain it. So they say your chickens aren't tame. That's what it is. No, I can take any bloodline. I've been doing it for 50 years. I can take any bloodline and the gamest of the game, and I can range any stag 9 months old. I don't have to pick them up at 4 months old or 5 months old because you look at a stag when you put him in a round pen or you put him in a 4x4 pen. Look at him the next day. Look at him mentally where he is. He'll be standing there depressed, shoulders slumped up. He's incarcerated. And you're going to keep him there until he grows a spur to put him on a tie cord. I don't use round pins. I don't use 4x4s. I've never used them. I don't have to. I can take a stag off the yard that's got a full spur. That's when I take them off and can tie them right directly on a tie cord if I choose to. And when I fight stags, I fight them the same way. I take them off the range. I put them through the last 4 or 5 days of my keep, just gentling them down. And then we show them here in the Philippines where it's legal. Throw that in there. We show them because they're in the best shape they're ever going to be in. there's no need for me to condition them because I never suppress their physical ability. They're at the peak already. So all I need to do is just gentle them down and then go through my pointing process.
See, like for me, when you said something about the old cockbird, I'm a firm believer in Mama and Papa. I raise a couple different kinds of chickens, but I raise some breast chickens for meat because we harvest our own.
Sure.
And I had a bunch of those. Another thing people don't agree with is 4 or 5 weeks, you're not in a brooder anymore. I hatch a lot, but 4 or 5 weeks, if it's a warmer month or a warmer time of the year, 4 weeks, you're outside. Colder time of the year, 5 weeks, you're outside.
Yeah.
And it's survival of the fittest because I want hybrid vigor in my birds. And so I put a bunch of these in a grow out with I had a hatch pullet. And she was a good mama. She's really good. She will not put an egg anywhere but in a nest box, all the things. And I had a friend come over and they're like, why in the world do you have a game bird in with all your little ones? I said, that's my mom. She's training.
Yeah.
And they're like, that just blew their mind. But I'm like, this is the personality traits behind her. This is what makes her a good hen.
Yeah.
And because when you identify a good brood fowl, you need to handle them and take care of them and use them for those purposes. And I said, I'm going to put her with these until they start laying their own eggs. And I guarantee you they will lay eggs only there. There might be a stray the first week or two, but she'll get them straight. And then in the same sense, when you do have a bunch of cockbirds out, you got Pawpaw in the yard.
Yeah.
When the little ones, just like at home, when your teenagers start acting stupid, Pawpaw has to take care of it and fix it. So that's definitely a good benefit to keeping those brood fowl around, and it works.
Ratliff he never used an incubator in his entire life, and 80 plus years of raising chickens. He never used an incubator, not once. And he always told me, I asked him several times, why don't you use an incubator, Mike? It'd just be so much easier for you. And I don't think there's anything that incubator is going to teach that hen won't. That hen will teach him a lot more than that incubator. He said, how's that incubator going to teach him to get up on a roost pole? He said, but in a week or so, or a couple of weeks, that hen will have these chicks up on the roost. There's a lot to, of course, just like everything, every industry, everything, we have to have it bigger, faster now. And that's why we incubate, so we can control it more and all of that. But yeah, I think you lose a lot when you take the hens away. When you take the hen out of the equation, other than just being an egg producer, I think there's a lot that we lose. And I think gamefowl suffer from it.
And see, that's one of the reasons why 4 to 5 weeks, they're out. Now, I'd have put them with Mama and I let her do her job. And these particular group of birds, they're about 5.5, 6 months old. And it's really funny because they're like 5 pounds, 5 pounds and change, huge. And I got this hatch still in there. And even when I go in the pen to feed them, she will herd them over to the other side. I put the feed in the trough and then she runs it. And it is important. And I think that fowl will learn a lot from being with an adult fowl. I do agree with that. Now, the control aspect, the guy in me that likes to run my own show, that's why I have 2 cabinet incubators that are the size of a mini fridge.
Yeah.
It works. Now, a while ago, you talked about tie cords, and I'm going to be the first to say that a 3-foot tie cord, in my opinion, is way too short.
Yeah, agreed.
That's crazy because personally, I like to use 55-gallon drums.
Yeah. I had it when I was in the U.S. Yeah.
And I will screw a 2x4 to the top, and I'll drill some holes in the bottom and anchor them down with some rebar so the wind don't blow them all over the place. Because I will actually put the bird onto the end of the roost with the tie cord.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about tie cords, the purpose, how long or how often you put them on there. And let's talk about some safety measures to make sure that you don't come home and your bird's been hanging upside down ever since you went to work.
Yeah. Yeah. I, if you double that 3 feet, that's a starting point for me. That's the least that I'll do one is 6 feet. Mine were normally about 7 feet is where is this last big farm that I had. I did them at 7 feet. I've had them as long as 8. That's a little over for me, but try to do them at 7 feet is what I did. Now I use barrels for me, I get this question a lot about which is the best type of TP or to use or housing to use on tie. To me, it depends on where you are and what your weather is. In the U.S., when I lived in Tennessee, and sometimes it would get down in the single digits there around Knoxville, I used a barrel. I used a drum, like you said, 55-gallon drum, turned it upside down, and I did a cutout in the bottom, did a door, and I put a roost pole on the inside. Just 6-8 inches off the ground, just enough so their feet doesn't freeze, so enough for them to get on. I took the rebar, like you said, steel stake, and secured it to the ground good with the steel bar. And instead of using the spinning roost pole like you're talking about, or secure a roost pole on the piece of wood on the top, I put my tie cord right through the top of it. And so that the tie cord come off the top of the barrel. And then they had a 360 degree that they could go around the barrel. And if they needed shade, they could follow the shade around, or they could go inside the barrel, either one in the summertime. And that's the way I would do it. I had a water cup on the inside of the barrel. And then I'd also sometimes just set the water cup or a feed cup on top, and they'd fly up and eat. Back then where I lived, I fed on the ground a lot as well, because it wasn't like here. My soil was pretty good and wasn't that bad. But I've used the metal TPs. I've used these made out of plywood that had treated plywood that had like a linoleum on the outside of them. Mike Ratliff used to use what he called Quonset huts. They were rounded sheet metal. I've seen guys make barrels out of. Here in the Philippines, they use tires. They turn the tires inside out and make a teepee out, make a house out of it. Those are popular here. The ones that I had here in my last farm were cement. I made cement teepees. They were 4 foot by 30 inches long and 4 foot tall, and had a roost pole across the top. And I use those here for a couple of reasons. One, the typhoons, when they have storms here, they'll send everything else sailing down the road with the high winds. The other thing is they're much cooler. That cement stays cool on the inside. So that rooster, quite a bit of temperature difference stepping inside there in the shade. Yeah. My other pet peeve with tie cords real quick is people put them too close together. They just put them way too close together. You got roosters all day long pulling on each other, trying to.
Yeah, that to me, that just, if you're going to do that, just let them free range.
Yeah.
And wait till later. So let's talk a little bit about some table work. Define, what is it? What what role does it play in conditioning and making the birds walk and do all kinds of stuff? And if you want to talk about some of your technique, if you want to share some of that, you can. If not, I understand that too.
No, I don't have any secrets. I've got everything I know. I teach. I've got books and DVDs and streams and all that out there. We've been trying to tell the whole story for several years now. And ever since I wrote the first book, Perfect Point. But as far as conditioning is concerned, table work, my first thing I want to say about it is, if you don't know what you're doing, and then don't, because you'll mess them up a lot faster you'd be better off to take them off cord and just show them that way than you would be, or take them out of a fly pan and show them that way than you would with, unless you're going to learn it, don't bother to try and do it, because you will make them sore, you'll make them tight. And so many people do table work wrong. They overdo it. They do it too fast. They do too much of it. We start out with 5 runs and 5 flies. That's where we begin in our pre-keep. And even in the keep, once we get to the keep, we start out with 30 runs, 30 flies. And then the last week of the keep, we don't even do runs, and we only fly the first 3 days of the last 7 days or last 6 days of the keep. Ratliff used to always say, low and slow, think and relax. That's what he used to always tell me. If you're tense, the bird will be tense. If you're relaxed, the bird will eventually be relaxed. And I'm a big believer in table work, but for me, it's more about bonding with the bird and having my hands on the bird. And we do a work and reward. We work the birds, and then we do a rub down on the bird. We massage the bird. We do a gentle rub down. I see these guys pressing on birds. I'm like, guys, relax. You're not making bread. They look like they're kneading bread over here. Just a gentle rub down. It's more about just relaxing the bird, bonding with the bird. You're not doing a deep tissue massage.
Some guys feel like that's what it is.
Yeah.
So if you scroll through videos like the shorts that they have on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, if you scroll through those, your phone listens to what you talk about, and it shows you videos based off of that.
Yeah.
And you'll see these guys that I'm confused. I'm like, why are you giving the bird a deep tissue massage? Are you fixing to eat it?
Yeah.
You put some marinade in it? What are we doing? Because nobody and they get rough with them, and it blows my mind. And there's tons of scammers all over Facebook, and a lot of times you'll find out that's probably one of them, because obviously he doesn't know how to handle a bird.
You see these guys running them, and they're running them super fast. You see these guys flying them, and they're, and I'm like, and
natural about that.
Yeah, no, you don't want the bird. You want the bird to put his wings together over his head, and you want to hear that, because his wing butts are hitting each other over his head. If he's relaxed, if he's loose, then he's putting his wings up there. And if he's able to do that consistently, then he's obviously already in pretty good shape. He's not bound up. Ratliff used to always, I won't say what he said, but he always said you should touch a rooster like you touch a certain part of a woman's anatomy, and be gentle. And so I can remember him still, after all these years, 30, 40 years ago, him yelling at me in the cockhouse, what's wrong with you? Slow down. Yeah, I'd say it's the number one mistake. They don't like table work here in the Philippines, and they don't like table work, one, because it takes consistency. It takes being on at the same time every day. It takes effort to put it in. And I think a lot of people here have gotten a negative idea about table work because they tried it. Their birds, they did it too much, too hard. Their birds couldn't cut after that because they were too tight. They were stoved up. And human beings just naturally, if a little bit is good, then just dump a ton of it on here and this will be great. And a lot of guys go at working roosters the same way.
When you're conditioning a bird or when you're working with them, what kind of diet how do you change the diet of the bird? What do you do different? Because obviously you don't have them scratching and pecking all over the yard or anything like that. What do you do different as far as how you feed them or whatever?
I go up to about a 23% protein. I normally feed about 16.5, 17% as a maintenance feed. A lot of guys feed lower than that. I just think gamefowl are a different creature than poultry, than regular chickens. And I think it takes a little more protein they're the Lamborghinis of the fowl world. And I just think it takes a little higher octane. I don't like anything above 17%, but 16.5, 17% is where I do my maintenance feed. About a week on my tie cords, I start feeding a higher protein, and I eventually step it up. During the keep itself, I'm feeding about around 23% protein level. I when I have guys all the time want to know what combination of grains and all of that, I'm not as interested in, as long as it's got the right amino acids, as long as it's got the right amount of fat, as long as it's got the right amount. I'm not I'm not a feed designer. So because feed is different everywhere. What I can get here is different from what you can get there. And what you can get in Alabama is different than what you can get in Texas. It's going to be different. So it's not so much about, as long as you got your percentages. I think they need more percentage protein because of the work that they're putting in. It's a good diet for them. And I feed a wet feed in the evening. I put 1 ounce. I use 3 parts water, 1 part milk. The milk is not, and I get this question all the time. Is the milk a laxative? What's the secret to the milk? And I even, in the first book that I wrote, I called it magic milk because so many people were like, oh, the milk is magic. What is it that it does? The milk is nothing more than flavoring to get the birds to drink the water. And I use the water as a standard to be able to control the moisture content on the day before the show and the day of the show. I don't want to be counting sips of water. I don't want to be guessing how much to dry out I know exactly how long to dry them out. I know exactly, based on where they are, based on where their droppings, how wet their droppings are, or how dry their droppings are. I know how much to adjust. I have a way to adjust my moisture in the final 2 feeds. I have a way to adjust it because I know exactly how much moisture they've taken in that way. Now, the wild card in all of it is them breathing in moisture. The humidity in the air, if it's humid or it rains on you or whatever. And the way that we control that is with a dehumidifier. I use a dehumidifier. For whatever reason, for me, and the timeline that I use, the perfect humidity is 55 to 60%. Oddly enough, that's the same humidity that you hatch an egg at. I've always wondered at the crossover there, but the perfect humidity to dry a rooster out in 4 to 5 hours is about 55% humidity. And so we use our dehumidifier and I can bring them into where with that, I can bring them in that when the chemical release, the fight or flight kicks in and they get the adrenaline and endorphin release during the point, they'll get the most out of that. They'll get the most out of that point chemical release at that stage of being dried out. They're dried out enough to dry out the intestinal tract, but not so much that you start getting into the muscle moisture, because you do not want to get into the muscle moisture.
Yeah, true. So another thing that to me is important, and a lot of people, this is something that people can try to describe it. And I want you to try to describe it so people can hear it from different people's point of view. Unless somebody actually handles their birds, they don't know what you're talking about. But tell us, when you feel the birds, how do you know if they're too fat or if they're too tight? How do you feel them for conditioning? What are you looking for? How do you know if they're too tight? How do you get them to where they're not so tight? How do you make those changes?
I always get this all the time. I've been getting it for years, ever since I stepped out into the public eye several years ago, teaching about gamefowl. People send me pictures every week. It used to be every day. Now it's every week. I'll get several pictures from people saying, what do you think about this rooster? And I'm like, it's a rooster. What do you want me to say?
Yeah.
Does he look good? Well, yeah, he looks fine, but do you think this is a winner? I'm like, you can't tell nothing about a gamecock. You can't tell nothing about a gamecock without putting your hands on it. There's just no way to tell anything without feeling the body. Feathers are feathers. Feathers are like Facebook filters. They're like, they can look great, but what's underneath it? That may be a hatchet-breasted disaster. You have to put your hands on a rooster's body to be able to tell anything about it. The conformation is important. I like the big-breasted roosters. In my thinking, I like something that's that can be cut between the outside of the rooster and the vital organs. The less there is protecting there, the simpler it is to kill it. As far as fat is concerned, Ratliff taught me the first day I went to his school way back in the 80s, early 80s. That's the first thing he teaches is how to check fat on a rooster. And he'll tell you, he used to always tell all the students when I went through 5 of his classes, he would always tell on the day before the class, when everybody got there, he'd teach everybody and he'd say, now you've already got your $500 worth. Everything after today is bonus. He said, knowing how to check fat on a rooster is worth the tuition that I charge for this class. Mm-hmm. And the way he taught us is you turn the rooster with his head here and his tail here, and you take your hand and you run it down the breastbone all the way to the end of the breastbone. At the end of the breastbone, there's a space about 3/4 of an inch between the tip of the bottom side of the breastbone, the tip, and the tailbone or the pettibone, whatever people call it, tailbone. There's a space in there where the breastbone is here and the tailbone is here. That space in between, if you take your middle finger and your thumb and you push it up in there and squeeze, a chicken with no gut fat should just have what feels like heavy skin or heavy tissue. You should be able to move it and feel just a little bit of thickness to it. If it's just nothing but feels like paper, just paper thin, then the rooster's too thin. But you can reach up in there and you can feel 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch. Every 1/4 of an inch is an ounce of fat, but basically is what it translates to. Every 1/4 of an inch is an ounce of fat. And so that's how we always determine if a rooster was too fat or too thin. And I won't put roosters in the keep that are even an ounce too fat. I don't want them, because fat rooster holds moisture and he's impossible to dry out. I never put up roosters that are too fat. As far as the body after the conditioning, the second week of the keep, the flesh should start to feel spongy, but not too spongy. Almost like a cork, almost like cork board. It's got a little bit of give to it, but it's firm, it's tight. And that's the body that you're looking for. The other thing that I always look for is a rooster that's coming into that physical state where he needs to be. He gets lighter and lighter. It's not that his weight changes. It's just that he holds his body weight up and he feels much lighter in the hand than a rooster that's laden with moisture.
All right. That is very descriptive. And I'm hoping that with that description, the people that are listening can really get that. And heck, maybe some of them will go grab a bird tonight and
start feeling the difference in them. I saw the comments there about the carbo loading, not to get off topic, but I don't carbo load at all. For me, carbo loading is a waste of time. I just don't. Why would I fuel off of carbs when I can fuel off of adrenaline? I point chickens. I don't carbo load. I'm not looking for an 8-hour fight. I'm looking for an 8-second fight. So I don't waste my time on carbo loading. Part of the deal with adrenaline with point, the body's natural fight or flight system is adrenaline is what they give shock patients to keep people from going into shock. They give adrenaline. I've never seen a doctor give carbs to keep a patient from going into shock. They don't feed you mashed potatoes.
I mean, you don't get carbs when you go to the hospital, period.
No. So I think carbo loading is great if you're going to be in a long competition where that it converts over to energy in the body and all of that. But the guy that's fueling on adrenaline is going to kill you an hour before you ever get to use those carbs. So I don't carbo load. I studied it. I looked at it. I talked to Ratliff about it years ago, and no, it's just not for me. Might work for somebody else, but I'll stick with what happens naturally. I'll learn how to manipulate what happens naturally to use it to my best advantage. I would rather stick with what the body doesn't release carbs when it's a flight or fight situation. it releases adrenaline. So I'll stick with the design that God came up with to begin with. That's what's released in a fight or flight situation. That's what point is.
Right.
And so I'll stick with that.
Doug, I want to say I definitely appreciate you coming on and talking to us about conditioning. Before we go, if you would tell everybody where they can learn more information and learn how you do things and find your videos and your books.
We're restructuring everything. I stepped away from the show. I'm going to be not sure what the future of the website, but you can go to our website right now, topspur.tv. And while they last, the books and DVDs are going to be on there, but we're selling out, guys. We're selling out. We may re-release some of the stuff at Christmas time with the release of this new book. But as far as right now, you can go there and you can get like John Anthony Marks' stuff. We're no longer selling it. It's sold out. I think Rooster Hacks the video is selling out, but you can pick up Perfect Point, the book, the original book, Breeding Basics and History of the Gamefowl Volume 1. We also have Gamefowl Essentials, which is a 4-hour DVD or stream. The Masterclass, which is all about conditioning, pointing, everything that we touched on today. It's about an 8-hour DVD. Comes with a set of downloadable notes as well. And Rooster Hacks is on there. I think that's all of them. I mentioned all of them. But you can get those at www.topspur.tv.
All right. And as always, we want to thank Rapido Rooster for hosting the show. And I would like for everybody to tune in next week. Next week, we're going to have Alan McGee from Memphis Game Farm on, and he's going to be talking to us about some things that he does and how he runs his farm. Until next week, I will see you guys in the comment section.
Listen.